Hi, and welcome to episode 13 of the Quality Talk podcast. My name is Prashant. I live in Melbourne, Australia, and I'm trained in media, communications, and journalism. I create this podcast every week, talking about things which matter to all of us, be it something that's in the news or something from health and well-being, society, or culture. For the last few episodes, I've been talking about different things which can help us at this current time of a global pandemic and lockdown. My intention has been to highlight the things which can help us get through this phase safely with our well-being intact. Just like you, I realize that this is an unusual time for all of us. We might have stressors unique to our life situation, but many of us are simply observing this phase collectively as global citizens. And one of the things we're all witnessing is the rise of a new kind of leadership at this time, one that is unlike what we've seen in recent times. So in today's episode, let's talk about leadership and trust at this time. What does it mean to be a good leader? What qualities and communication style does a leader need to have at a time like this to lead effectively? And when it comes to trust, whom do we trust? And what has this current crisis told us about our collective trust? I decided to talk about leadership and trust after coming across an article about how countries with female heads of state have done exceedingly well in handling this situation. In this part of the world where I live, the Asia Pacific region, New Zealand is being held up as a great example. Its Prime Minister, Mr. Jacinda Ardern, announced a complete lockdown in the country before any other country did, and now after more than 30 days of being in a lockdown, New Zealand has become one of the biggest success stories in this fight against COVID-19, as there have been no incidents of community transmission. Throughout the lockdown phase, Prime Minister Ardern kept communicating with the people in her country online through Facebook Live, which is a very personal and direct way of communication, unlike the usual political communication system of going through news media or public broadcasters. And she is not alone in the way she has handled this situation. Similar proactive measures were taken by political heads in Taiwan, Finland, and Denmark, all of which have women as their state heads. Some people have also highlighted how Germany's Angela Merkel has been a voice of reason for people in her country throughout this scenario. Aside from gender, what is common amongst these leaders and their way of handling this crisis is their communication and leadership style. From a crisis communication perspective, the success of these leaders lies in their leadership style, which is grounded in empathy and concern for human life. Their actions seem to come from a place of protecting people and their welfare, and not from a place of blame-shifting, panic, or strong protectionism. This is the key to their success. Back when I was studying for my master's in global media communication, I studied and researched business leaders and their communication at the time of a crisis. And repeatedly, whenever the leaders showed empathy and respect, they received less flack from people, be it on social media or otherwise. And this is what I see in the communication style of these national political leaders as well. For the lack of a better word, their leadership style is focused on nurturing and being kind to each other. It fits well because in the crisis we are facing, this is what works best. When people around the world are losing their jobs, their livelihoods, and their loved ones, not out of choice but because of factors beyond their control, what we all crave for is kindness, acceptance, empathy, and support, which is what these leaders are providing through their leadership and communication style. In fact, I looked at some of the messages told by these leaders, and there is a lot of empathy, respect, and concern factored into them. The New Zealand Prime Minister, for instance, introduced this idea of creating a bubble around us with people in it that we were isolating with, and to imagine how we would behave if we already had COVID-19 and everyone else out of our bubble did not. It takes a lot of empathy and courage to say this, because nowhere is she lashing out at anyone or blame shifting. Another leadership quality which surfaced from their messages is focus on action in a realistic manner, which has enabled them to become much more relatable for the people in their country and beyond. Traditionally, we would not expect the Prime Minister of a country to be giving a public message while doing dishes or with a children's toy visible just behind them in a video message. But this is exactly what has happened, and it has worked. Denmark's Prime Minister posted a video of her doing the dishes, and her approval ratings since have more than doubled. In Australia, the Prime Minister and state premiers have talked repeatedly about how regular people, dads and mums and families, will be handling this crisis. And this has enabled a majority of people to relate with them. So the essence of good leadership and crisis communication at this time has been very much about accepting the situation we are in, as there is no way out until we start taking the steps we are meant to be taking. And being mindful of the fact that everyone else around us is also going through this. So blaming others, be it someone from a specific country or origin, is really not going to help at this point. Instead, encouraging people to be kind, patient, and careful would definitely help. This is a global humanitarian crisis, and a humane leadership and communication style is appropriate, which is what is being shown by these successful leaders who are receiving a lot of praise and public support right now. Closely linked to leadership is the concept of trust. At the time of any crisis, trust becomes all important because we all seek those whom we can trust. In this crisis, we are all seeking leadership from national political leaders who are making the policies to keep us safe. And when it comes to trust, we are all placing our trust in medical workers, doctors, nurses, paramedics, scientists, and researchers. This is very much a medical and healthcare crisis. Those who are keeping people safe and helping affected recover successfully are the doctors and nurses. In fact, chief medical officers have become one of the most trustworthy sources of information for people, on whom everyone is relying to know more about what is being done to bring the situation under control. In Australia, we've seen senior medical professionals like Dr. Brendan Murphy rise into the spotlight in every press briefing. And over in the US, Dr. Anthony Fauci is being held as a trustworthy source of information for people. People's trust in doctors and nurses at this time is high. In fact, many people are now turning to the advice being offered online, mainly by doctors, about how to deal with this scenario. Trust is an important factor in a crisis, and irrespective of titles, medical professionals have been hoisted as the real heroes at this time. I was pleasantly surprised to find out that, according to a recent study, many of us would in fact turn to our local doctor or a medical hotline for advice during this time. This is important to note because usually today, what most of us would do is to simply Google something or go on Facebook and find out what is being said. But given the amount of fake news and misinformation that is circulating online, it could be dangerous for us to rely on unverified medical advice. In fact, tech companies like Google and Facebook have also stepped up their efforts to censor any unsolicited or unverified medical advice amidst the COVID-19 crisis. Even though in the past they've always shown hesitation to censor content on their platforms, particularly when the whole fake news saga started after the 2016 US presidential elections. So the point about trust which emerges from this current situation is that good old expertise is not dead, popular to contrary belief. Whether that be technical medical expertise through trained and qualified doctors and nurses, or effective leadership through empathy and respect, our trust in expertise has been renewed and highlighted throughout this crisis. It has taken this crisis for us to be reminded of what matters, the brass tacks. Trust in our experts, be it medical or political, and how far are they worthy of being able to deliver on the needs of those who trust them. Will they be able to show optimism to the masses and lead them to a better place, navigating carefully through the crisis? This is the million-dollar question I would like to end this episode on. This episode was another attempt to not just make sense of what is happening around us in the world, but also to be able to help those of you who listen to the podcast during this time. I hope you found the topic helpful. You can listen to this podcast on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. I create new episodes every week, and next week I'll be back talking about something which matters to all of us. Until then, I wish you all a safe, happy, and healthy week ahead.